Metro Boomin and Future just dropped their second collab album, We Still Don't Trust You, and it's a lot different from their normal sound. It's got a ton more emotional R&B leaning songs that keep getting better with every single listen, which I think is a great change of pace compared to their first album that's filled with more hard-hitting trap bangers. So today we're gonna dive into the production techniques Metro uses on this album to make these beats so addicting to listen to. If I were to sum this album up in one sentence, it feels like experimental R&B melodies mixed with some more trap-leaning drums. So to start off, let's go over the melodies. There's a ton of synths used in the melodies on this album. There's also a lot more guitar than I expected from Metro and Future on this album, but it sounds amazing. And lastly, a lot of these melodies have some super vibey and emotional vocal chops. And by far, one of my favorite vocal chops on this album was the Brownstone If You Love Me sample on Love Bad Bitches. So I wanted to recreate a similar vocal myself without using any samples. And if you listen to Love Bad Bitches, for the majority of the song, it's just the vocal chop and a sub bass as the melodic elements. So the first thing I did was put down this super deep, vibey, late night kind of synth bass sound that I could write some vocals to. And once I had that, I just kind of started mumbling in the mic, freestyling some melody ideas to find something that I wanted to use. And once I found a melody that I liked, I wrote some super generic R&B love lyrics and got this lead vocal. Bear with me and trust the process. I really can't sing, but this is gonna turn out super dope once it's flipped. I was fucked up about your love, oh baby. Once I had that, I wanted to build out the vocal a little bit more, because if you listen to the vocal sample on Love Bad Bitches, you can tell that it's more than just a lead vocal. You can hear some backing vocals that are kind of giving the vocal a big, rich kind of texture. So the first thing I did was dub over the lead, just recording the same thing a couple times on certain words that I wanted to emphasize, and I got this. I was fucked up about your love, oh baby. Ooh, I was fucked up by your love. Girl, I just can't get enough. And once I had that done, I wanted to add some backing vocals that weren't saying any words and kind of acting almost more like chords to kind of fill out the vocal so it could stand on its own and be the whole entire melody of this beat. I was fucked up about your love, oh baby. I was fucked up by your love. Girl, I just can't get enough. I'm just needing your touch, baby. Now, this is sounding a lot better than just the lead, in my opinion, but it's definitely not cutting it if we're going for that authentic 90s R&B sample vibe. So I sent this idea over to my vocalist, Shantae Marie, to re-sing, and she knocked it out of the park.
I was fucked up about your love, oh baby. I was fucked up about your love, yeah, I just can't get enough. I'm just needing your touch, baby.
And now, even though on Love Bad Bitches they just keep the vocal sample and the bass as the main melody, I really wanted to add some synthy R&B chords, and a perfect example of those are on Nights Like This. As you can tell, those chords are super wavy, but they're also really subtle because they've been super filtered, which is a great technique that Metro uses all over this album to create space for Future's vocal. So I grabbed this synth pad from Analog Lab and I put down these super simple but effective R&B chords. And then I put Decimort 2 over that to filter it out so that the vocals could be the star of the show. One key thing to make this progression sound a little bit more R&B is to put a note out of key, and this progression is super common in R&B. So the first thing I want to do is put all these chords back to their normal inversion. We're starting right here with this F minor 7th, and then right here we would typically have this be a G minor 7th like this, but what we're doing is we're moving this note up 1, and this now becomes a G7 chord, which adds a ton of tension and really gives that smooth R&B kind of sound. If you listen without that, this is what our progression sounds like. It just sounds a little bit basic. If you just put this note up, it gives it just a lot more tension. That's sounding crazy. If you haven't noticed, I've been recording all of this at a super slow BPM of 112, and that was on purpose, so that I could take those super slow vocals and speed them up to get that warped, sampled kind of sound that Metro uses all over this album. So I sped everything up to 136 BPM, messed with the pitch, and got this.
I was fucked up about your love, oh baby. I was fucked up about your love, yeah, I just can't get enough. I'm just needing your touch, baby.
Now, the core idea for the melody is pretty much finished, so we just need to build it out with a couple more sounds to really fill out this melody and make it stand out. From here, I wanted to add a filtered percussion loop, just like the one you can hear in the background of Gracious.
You're so contagious. You're so gracious.
And funny enough, I actually have the exact same perk loop that they used in this song by my boy XY Nothing. So I threw some effects on that and put that in our sample. Next up, on nights like this, there's this interesting synth key, plucky kind of sound that's super ear grabbing.
Nights like this, I need all of you.
So I went through my one-shot kits and found this synth one-shot that sounds super interesting and put down this super simple top-line melody. And next up, this album has a ton of analog synths, which are most likely done by Mike Dean, just like the ones on the outro of Beat It.
Beat it. Yeah. I go off until beat it.
Since Metro used more low-key synths for the majority of the song, whenever that section comes on with those more bright analog-y sounding synths, that section stands out a lot more and it brings a ton of energy to the outro of the song. So I wanted to do something similar and make a cool in-your-face synth outro for our beat. And to do that, all I did was copy and paste the same chords I used earlier on some more bright synth sounds from Analog Lab. And then I also swapped out that deep synth bass for a more in-your-face, crunchy, distorted kind of synth bass, and I got this. Now the melody is pretty much finished, but like I mentioned before, this album has a ton of guitars on songs like Red Leather, Beat It, and by far one of my favorite guitar parts on this album is on All to Myself.
Need you all to myself. Need you all to myself. Need you all to myself.
That distorted guitar just sounded too crazy, so I had to add something like this to our melody. So I went into my Elements of Trap kit that has a bunch of live electric guitar phrases, and this is what they sound like before effects. But to nail that sound that the guitars have on All to Myself, I needed these to sound a lot more gritty and distorted to really give off that emotion. So I went into Logic and I grabbed this distorted electric guitar lead preset, and all together with the synths for the outro, this is what it sounds like. After messing with the pitch for a couple sections and the arrangement of the sample, the melody was done. So now it's time to get into the drums. But before that, if you've been enjoying this video so far, make sure you hit that subscribe button so I can keep making more videos like this. I'm really trying to hit 100K by the end of the year, so let's see if we can hit that. Anyways, back into it. The drums on this album have a lot of normal Metro kind of trap elements to them, but he also does some experimental stuff, which is really cool. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But for the main section of our beat, let's start with some simple drums like the ones on Love Bad Bitches.
I like good girls. I like good girls. I like good girls. Yeah, but I love.
The first thing that I noticed was a hard-hitting kick and snare, so I grabbed a kick and snare and put down this simple pattern. Next up, I noticed that these drums had a simple 2-step hi-hat pattern, but the second hi-hat was a lot lower in volume compared to the first one, which gives it a much more human and less robotic bounce. Also, if you listen to Always Be My Fault, you can hear that Metro uses this subtle technique where he has his hi-hats panning from left to right, which just adds a little bit more ear candy and makes it a little bit more interesting. So I did the same thing by using this tremolo plugin from Logic that's panning the hats from left to right. Next up, Metro's using a ton of open hats in his drums nowadays. So to finish off the main part of our drums, I grabbed 3 open hat samples. 2 more typical trap sounding open hats, and then one that sounds like it's almost off an 80s or 90s drum machine to kind of capture that synthy retro vibe that a lot of these drums have on the album. And to create a little bit more variety on these drums, I took some inspiration from the slow hi-hats on All to Myself. So instead of just editing the MIDI of my hi-hats, I wanted to get a little bit more experimental with it, and I put a halftime on the hi-hat, so it's actually putting it down an octave. And then I added some reverb in this ring shifter plugin, which is kind of automating the frequencies going up and down, and then also panning it from left to right, and it just makes it sound a lot more interesting. So far, these drums have been a bit typical, but like I said, Metro did experiment on this album with some more unconventional kind of drums. And my favorite example of this are the drums on This Sunday.
Told them what it came, I'ma come through, flashing through the city in a brand new.
It's got a super stop and go R&B kind of feeling that I wouldn't expect to hear from Metro Boomin, but it sounds crazy. And I thought some more OD experimental drums like this would work really well on the outro section of our beat. So I tried to do some similar hi-hats with some rolls and kind of that stop and go bounce, and I got this. And then I grabbed a kick to try to complement the hi-hat. From here, I wanted to create an even more unique bounce by deleting the first snare hit and replacing it with an open hat. Once I had that, I wanted to fill these drums out, so I grabbed this 80s sounding clap and drowned it with a bunch of reverb, and then I layered in this chopped up perk loop that kind of acts like a riser into that big reverb clap. Once I did that, the beat was finished. And this one gets super crazy at the end, so make sure you listen through it.
I was fucked up at your love, oh babe. I was fucked up about your love, yeah, I just can't get enough. I'm just needing your touch, baby.
Smooth. Put that little big clap in. Oh, that guitar is crazy. If you want to learn how to make some harder trap beats like Metro did on his first album with Future, click this video right here.